What's up, guys? My name is Tony, aka Son of the Bat from the Super Friends podcast, and you are watching the Hall of Justice.
It's clever and tough.
What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the Hall of Justice, where I go over this week's brand new issues. And as always, I am recording out of San Diego Comics, one of San Diego's oldest comic book shops with one of the largest varieties of back issues, and where you can receive 15% off all brand new books and trade paperbacks. And for those of you visiting San Diego this weekend, don't forget that this Saturday is National Batman Day. That's right, September 15th is National Batman Day. So what does that mean for you as a customer of San Diego Comics? That means that if you come in with any visible Batman attire, you will receive 25% off all of our Batman merchandise. Another cool thing is that the owner of the shop wants to go ahead and hold a contest, but we're going to need a few people to enter. So if you come in completely dressed up as Batman, you'll definitely be entered to win whatever the grand prize will be, which we're still trying to figure out. Obviously, it's going to be Batman related. So again, that's this Saturday, September 15th at San Diego Comics, where we'll also have reprinted copies of Batman White Knight just for Batman Day. And those are definitely first come, first serve, so show up early. So before we start, I just want to give you a heads up that I got about 12 books that I'm going to be reviewing today. Typically, I only go over about 9 of them. But this week, we did get a lot of #1 issues for brand new series. So the first book I want to go ahead and share with you guys is called 1975. And that's by Joe Casey and Ian Macewan. Now, this book might be hard for you to find because it doesn't actually have the number 1975 on it, but that's the year that it actually takes place. The book follows a cab driver by the name of Pamela, who right off the bat you could tell is a badass, which we see immediately after she starts fighting some ninjas in the city streets. Now, one of the cool things about Pamela is the fact that her weapon of choice is actually a magical tire iron. Now, within the pages of this book, we also see a bit of an origin story in regards to where she started off and why she wanted to become a cabbie. But eventually we see her going back to her night job, which is driving, just to come across 2 gangs of hooligans. Now, of course, having a weapon like a tire iron that has magic in it is a bit overpowering, so in this battle she decides not to use it. However, in the middle of this giant brawl, a monster appears out of nowhere in the middle of the street. Now, this monster seems to know who she is, based on the fact that it does share history with Pamela's father. So again, guys, this book, it's by Image Comics. The writer, Joe Casey, is doing a really good job. I'm really enjoying it so far. And if this is a book that you want me to go ahead and keep sharing throughout the continuing issues, then don't forget to join our Patreon by going to patreon.com/tsfpod, where for as little as $1 a month, you can decide what books I review each week. But again, I highly recommend it. Definitely pick up 1975 by Image Comics. The next book that I'm going to go ahead and share with you guys is Cemetery Beach, and that's by Warren Ellis and published by Image Comics. Now, this book immediately takes you right into the action, first by introducing you to a character by the name of Michael Blackburn, who we see immediately getting interrogated, and who seems to have no issue sharing all of his information, which is useful for the reader because what we find out during this interrogation is the fact that the location that he's in right now is considered an off-world colony. Michael also tells us that the old world, or the Earth, is where he originates from. After meeting up with a locked-up murderer named Grace, they both try to find their way out of the compound. Towards the end of the book, we find out that the person who would be considered the ruler of this colony doesn't want anyone from Old Home or Planet Earth to know about what he's been up to. So Cemetery Beach is pretty interesting because, like I said, it just throws you right into the action and really doesn't give you 100% of an explanation in regards to exactly where everything's going. However, it was definitely fun, and I'm really curious to see where it goes. So again, that's Cemetery Beach by Image Comics. Now, this next book is by a very small independent publisher that was able to get a large group of creative minds together to write and illustrate this story. The book being called The Wrong Earth. So the cool thing about this book is that it's a bit of a superhero satire, where we're introduced to 2 worlds that are actually the same, just from different universes. One being Fortune City from Earth Alpha, and the other being from Earth Omega. The main hero in this story goes by the name of Dragonfly Man, and immediately we're introduced to him and his sidekick, trapped by one of their main villains. Now, luckily enough, they do escape from this trap without a scratch. The book immediately shifts gears over to Earth Omega, where the same hero, however, in this case only going by Dragonfly, is in a street brawl with some thugs. The best way I can explain the differences between both characters, even though they're supposed to be the same, would be the difference between the 60s Batman, played by Adam West, and the Batman we see in the Dark Knight Returns series. So one version of this hero is very campy and happy-go-lucky, and the other one is super gritty and super brutal. What ends up happening is the fact that these heroes end up crossing Earths and finding themselves on a world that they definitely don't belong in. And immediately, Dragonfly Man finds himself struggling finding help from the local police, and instead getting shot. This is a real interesting take on the superhero genre, and one of the coolest things about it is the fact that Grant Morrison is attached to this project as well. I highly recommend it. Like I said, it's from a small publisher, Ahoy Comics, so if you can find it at your local comic book shop, I highly recommend picking it up. Again, that's The Wrong Earth by Ahoy Comics. Next up, by Boom Studios, is a 4-issue miniseries called Welcome to Wonderland. Now, this book is being written by Jackie Ball and illustrated by Maddie Gonzalez. The story follows a young girl who goes to her local amusement park, which has recently upset her over the fact that they haven't been upkeeping it very well. Think of it as Disneyland, but it continues to break down and fall apart. What we end up seeing is the main character struggling with one of the phrases of the theme park, which is, "If you only believe what you see, you might miss something wonderful." And after thinking about that phrase over and over again the next day, she ends up going back to the theme park to see if there's a literal meaning to that phrase, which, lo and behold, she does find a gate into Wonderland. In the actual Wonderland, she starts finding everything that her amusement park that she loves is actually based off, including a wicked queen and the queen's sister, Riot. After hitting it off, our main character as well as Riot are trying to figure out a way for her to return home, and in doing so they believe that they need to head to the main palace. Boom Studio right now is putting out a line of books under the imprint of Boombox, which are books for young readers. With that being said, it was actually a pretty fun read. And the good thing about it is that there's not much you have to get into before picking it up, since it is only a 4-issue miniseries. So again, that's Welcome to Wonderland by Boom Studios. Next up, by Aftershock Comics, we have Moth Whisper #1. This book immediately starts sharing the history of two of the world's greatest thieves, both going by the name Moth and Whisper. What we end up finding out towards the middle of the book is the fact that both Moth and Whisper haven't been seen in months, or at least the original people who took up those names. And the person now masquerading as both actually happens to be their child. Moth and Whisper had left a message for their child stating that if there was no word heard back from Moth or Whisper within 24 hours, that they should not go looking for them. However, their child does do the opposite and starts masquerading as both Whisper and Moth. And after much speculation in regards to who might have harmed both of them, our main character decides to target the largest crime lord in the city, who goes by the name of Ambrose Wolfe. Now, this is issue #1. I don't know if it's a mini-series or if it's going to be continuing. However, with that being said, I highly recommend it. This was definitely a book that I wasn't expecting to pick up today. But with the fact that Moth and Whisper have different traits in regards to thievery, this was a highly intriguing book, especially with the fact that now we have one person playing both characters. So again, that's Moth and Whisper #1 by Aftershock Comics. Next up, by Dark Horse Comics, and one of the most fun books I had reading today, is Mystery Science Theater 3000 by Dark Horse. So for those of you who grew up actually watching the original series and now possibly watching the new series on Netflix, this takes place directly in the current series timeline. In this book, we have our main antagonist, King of Forrester, forcing a group of robots and one human to riff off of comic books by actually putting them in the books themselves. The beginning of this book is mostly a tutorial as to how to read the riffs throughout the comic book. And the book that we get introduced to that they start their riffs with, they call Tom Sorvo Teen Reporter. Again, if you ever watched the series, you know how they definitely riff off of old films, and it's hilarious to watch. I was kind of curious to see how they would do this with the comics, and they actually succeed in doing it very well. Plus the fact that you see Tom Sorvo with a human body. Mystery Science Theater 3000, I believe, is a miniseries, and of course, again, if you've never heard of it, I highly recommend watching it on Netflix. That way you can get a feel for what you should be looking for in the comic book. So again, that's Mystery Science Theater 3000 by Dark Horse. Now, moving on to DC Comics, I want to go ahead and share two books back to back, mainly because they actually share the same antagonist in both stories. The first book being Superman issue #3, and the second being Supergirl issue #22. Now, both books involve the new villain Rogol Zaar, who we were first introduced to in the last page of Action Comics #1000. And from what we've been told through the Man of Steel miniseries is the fact that Krypton was not destroyed by natural disaster, but was in fact destroyed in a racial cleansing by Rogol Zaar. At the end of Man of Steel, we find out that Rogol-Zar got sent to the Phantom Zone. However, strangely enough, in the pages of Superman, the entire planet Earth has also been sent to the Phantom Zone, where the majority of Earth's heroes are actually struggling with this new atmosphere. One of the coolest things about issue 3 of Superman was the fact that Rogol-Zar was able to get together all of the villains that were sent into the Phantom Zone by Krypton, marching them directly towards Earth in the Phantom Zone. Now, in the pages of Supergirl, things are a little bit different, especially with the fact that we don't see Supergirl on Earth, but actually going off-planet, specifically towards Mogo, the living planet, who's also a Green Lantern, to get more information on who Rogol-Zar is. After immediately landing on Mogo, she starts asking John Stewart and a few of the other Green Lanterns for assistance in finding out the history of Rogol-Zar's weapon, a giant axe. And after breaking into the Green Lantern's databases to get more information on the weapon and Rogol-Zar, we see Kara having to go toe-to-toe with some Green Lanterns. However, this confrontation doesn't last very long, due to the fact that immediately it seems that Supergirl gets transported and is met by a vision by a long-dead guardian by the name of Appa Ali Apsa, who tells her about a group of universal beings who created Rogol-Zar. Like I said, with this issue as well as Superman connecting with the same villain, I definitely recommend reading both of them together. Again, that's Supergirl from DC Comics. Last but not least from DC, we have Hawkman issue number 3. One of my favorite things about this series right now is the fact that we are spanning space and time in regards to Carter Hall's history and reincarnations. And in issue 3, we see the current Carter Hall going up against his older self, Carter Hall, the police officer from Thanagar. After a long chase through the city, in which the original Carter Hall from Thanagar believes that the present time Carter Hall is actually Bythe, the man who tricked him into killing his father, the present timeline Hawkman convinces Carter Hall, the police officer, that they are both one and the same. The present timeline Hawkman also tells Carter Hall that he's been sent back into that time period to find a relic, but he's not really sure what it is he's looking for. Fortunately for Hawkman, the original Carter Hall does tell him where the item is and what it looks like. And after finally returning to his own timeline, Hawkman somehow activates the device and finds himself in the microverse face to face with the Atom. So there's definitely a lot more backstory in regards to where all of these Hawkmen came from and how it's possible for them to reincarnate throughout all these different planets and timelines. So I'm really curious to see what the microverse has to do with all of this as well. Again, that's Hawkman issue number 3 by DC Comics. Now, moving over to Marvel, we had a couple issue number 1s that I wanted to share with you guys, including Iceman number 1. In all honesty, I just wanted to let you guys know that this is an issue number 1 for a brand new miniseries. But with that being said, immediately we see that Bobby Drake gets teamed up with Bishop, which sounds pretty cool in itself. However, the story does kind of feel like it drags on a little bit, and the book definitely tends to touch on Bobby's personal struggles more than the situation as an X-Man itself. Without getting into too much of a fuss, I do feel that this story weighed heavily on one side of his personality and took away a lot from the fact that he is also an X-Man. And to be honest, that's not to take away from the fact that yes, all of us as people have struggles that we all go through. But definitely pick it up and read it and make your own opinion. The artwork was definitely great, and I feel that the story can build up a little bit better moving forward from issue 1. So again, that's Iceman number 1 from Marvel. Next up, again by Marvel Comics, we have Journey into Mystery number 1. The Birth of Krakoa. Now, for those of you who know comic book history, the title used to be an ongoing series, an original series that introduced everyone to Thor. However, in this book, we follow Sergeant Nicholas Fury and the Howling Commandos. And for those of you who follow the X-Men, you'll also recognize the name Krakoa as the living island that walks as a man. This book was really interesting in the fact that it showed how Krakoa was born before the crash landing of the Howling Commandos on the island. The story also shows us the effect that the island takes on the Howling Commandos themselves, including growing moss on their body. After the team crash lands on the island, Sergeant Fury does get separated from the rest of them, but does come face to face with the island itself. But does come face to face with the island's heart itself, and begins talking directly to it. The island begins to tell him that man has caused so much pain in creating him. Nick Fury decides to promise the island that if he keeps him and the Howling Commandos safe, at least until someone comes and finds them, that he'll promise that no one else will come bother the island. which of course we all know isn't the case, again, in the situation with the X-Men. This was definitely an interesting read, especially giving us an origin to one of the oldest, I would say, characters in Marvel history. Again, that's Journey into Mystery #1, The Birth of Krakoa. And last but not least, again by Marvel, we have Infinity Wars #3. Now, if you guys remember in Infinity Wars #2, we do see Gamora taking ownership of all of the Infinity Stones, utilizing her new Requiem armor. And immediately in the first page of Infinity Wars #3, we see her utilizing the stones almost as if she's a god. The crazy thing about this book is that during her conversations with Loki, she states that she has the power to literally fold the entire universe in half, which is pretty important to notice, especially when her father, Thanos, during Infinity Gauntlet, decided to destroy half of all life in the universe. So in a sense, she's kind of taking after her father, but also creating something entirely different, and merging souls for the new universe called Infinity Warps. This is where we see characters like Doctor Strange and Captain America, Iron Man and Thor, Moon Knight and Spider-Man all merged together to make one character. And in a few weeks, we're going to be seeing some one-shots of these new amalgamations of characters. One of the coolest things about this book was when Gamora actually heads back to the God Quarry, where, if you read the Thanos series, you read the fact that Thanos was able to find out who he truly was in the quarry itself, especially since it holds a ton of magical power. One of the funniest things at the end of this book is the fact that we see Loki going to the X-Mansion, or at least the X-Mansion in this new warped reality, and comes across a character called Dupepool, who at one point we're told actually loses his pants. But we also come across another character, which is an amalgamation of Emma Frost and Wolverine. Loki makes a joke about his name possibly being Diamond Patch, in which this version of Wolverine stabs him and then locks the door on him. So like I said, this book definitely leads up to the new mini-series as well as one-shots called Infinity Warps. So if you're interested in first appearances, this book has a ton of them. Again, that's Infinity Wars #3 by Marvel. So everyone, that's all the books that I wanted to go ahead and share with you guys this week. And again, if there's any books in particular that you want me to go ahead and share next week, the best way to do that is by becoming a patron, by going to patreon.com/tsfpod. Where, as I stated earlier, just by pledging $1 a month, you can suggest what books I share each week. And as always, I'd like to remind you that I'm recording out of San Diego Comics, where all back issues $10 and under are 25% off. And again, don't forget to show up this Saturday, the 15th, where we're going to be celebrating National Batman Day by offering up to 25% off all Batman-related titles and merchandise. But there's a catch. You must come in wearing some type of Batman attire which is visible. I can't stress enough, we have to see it, and no, don't show us your underwear. And if you come dressed up in costume, you'll be entered into a giveaway. I also want to give a shout out to Joe June for creating the intro music to this video. You can listen to him and follow him on social media at Joe June Music and at Vision Flow Records on Twitter and Instagram. So everyone, for those in San Diego this weekend, I hope to see you here. And for the rest of you, I hope you have a great rest of your week. Later.
It's clever and tough.
That could blow up the